You've probably heard some terrifying numbers. It takes 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours, maybe even more to learn a new language. You see a chart from the Foreign Service Institute and think 2,200 hours to learn Japanese? I have a job, I have a family, I guess it's just not for me. That feeling of discouragement is exactly why I'm making this video. Because that timeline, the one that makes language learning feel like an impossible mountain for a busy adult, is deeply misunderstood. It's based on a specific type of learning for a specific type of student, and it's probably not you. The real reason it takes so long for most people is that they're wasting their limited, precious time on activities that just don't move the needle. In this video, I'm going to show you why the actual timeline to learn a language is much more encouraging than you think. And more importantly, I'll show you how to shrink it dramatically by shifting from scattered, passive exposure to a focused system of high-impact, active learning. And if you stick around until the end, I'll show you a way for you to completely level up your language learning on a busy schedule. Alright, let's talk about those big, scary numbers. They usually come from the US Foreign Service Institute, or FSI. Their chart estimates it takes around 600 classroom hours for an easy language like Spanish, and up to 2,200 hours for a hard language like Mandarin to reach professional working proficiency. But here's the fine print they don't put in flashing lights. Those numbers are for future diplomats in full-time, intensive classroom programs. We're talking small group instruction, 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. That timeline is for their specific high-stakes goal. It doesn't have to be your timeline, especially when you have modern evidence-backed methods at your fingertips. The real problem isn't the total number of hours, it's the quality of those hours. For most people, their language learning is a scattered mess of low-impact activities. They have a podcast in the background playing while they cook dinner. They mindlessly scroll through a vocab app for 10 minutes while watching TV. They spend an hour staring at a grammar chart only to forget the rule by morning. This is like wanting to get fit by occasionally walking past a gym. Sure, you're in the vicinity of fitness, but you're not actually doing the work that builds muscle. This is the core misunderstanding that keeps people stuck. They confuse time spent passively exposed to a language with time spent actively learning it. And that simple difference is the difference between taking a decade and taking a year. So, what does it mean to switch from passive to active? Let's say you want to learn to cook. Passive learning is watching a cooking show. You see the chef, you hear the ingredients, and it looks delicious. But you haven't really learned anything until you get into the kitchen and try to follow the recipe yourself. That is active learning. It's engaging, it's a little challenging, and it's the only way you actually build a skill. In language learning, this breaks down into a simple 3-part formula. First, active, comprehensible input. This is the foundation of it all. The idea, made famous by linguist Stephen Krashen, is that we acquire a language when we understand messages in that language. But comprehensible and active are the magic words. It's not just having a foreign movie on in the background. It's watching a short clip where you can mostly understand what's going on, maybe a show for kids or a YouTube channel for learners, and locking in your focus to understand the message. You are actively engaged in the process of understanding. Second, active recall. This is one of the most powerful learning techniques backed by tons of research. We usually think learning is about shoving information into our brains, but the strongest learning happens when we force ourselves to pull information out. This is the whole idea behind flashcards. When you see a word and have to struggle for a second to remember what it means, you're building a much stronger neural connection. That little bit of difficulty isn't a sign of failure, it's the feeling of learning itself. And third, push to output. Input builds your passive vocabulary, the words you recognize. But output, speaking and writing, is how you turn that into an active vocabulary you can actually use. When you force yourself to speak or write, you're basically doing active recall on a massive scale. You have to retrieve words, piece together grammar, and form sentences. This process instantly shows you where the gaps in your knowledge are, and magically, you'll start noticing those exact words and structures the next time you listen or read. Input gives you the lumber, but output teaches you how to build the house. Now this all sounds great in theory, but what does it look like on a random Tuesday when you're already exhausted? The good news is, You don't need 3-hour study blocks. You can make more progress in 30 focused minutes than in 3 distracted hours. Here's the blueprint. Kick off with 5 minutes of active recall. Use a spaced repetition app like Anki for the most common words in your language. Don't just flip through. Force your brain to remember the word before you check the answer. Next, spend 20 minutes on active, comprehensible input. This could be a chapter from a graded reader, a podcast for learners spoken slowly, or a simple story on YouTube. The key is that you should understand the gist of it without needing a dictionary for every other word. Finally, spend 5 minutes on mini output. It's simple. Talk to yourself. In your target language, try to summarize what you just read or heard in a few sentences. Or just describe the room you're in. The goal isn't perfection, it's just to get the engine running. When you stop wasting time and start investing in these high impact hours, the timeline changes completely. The key takeaway is this: it does not take forever. It takes a finite number of good hours, and you are in total control of how good those hours are. Once you understand this framework, the old excuses just don't hold up. Even 20 minutes of focused, high-impact activity is worth way more than an hour of distracted, passive listening. These small, consistent deposits compound like crazy over time. So, how long does it really take to learn a language? Well, it takes exactly as long as it takes you to rack up enough high-quality focus hours. The secret isn't finding more time, it's making your time count. It's about swapping passive, low-value habits for an active, high-impact system. A cycle of comprehensible input to build understanding, active recall to forge strong memories, and output to turn knowledge into a real-world skill. You have far more control over this journey than you've been led to believe. You don't need thousands of hours. You need a few hundred good hours of focused, engaging work. You can absolutely do this. If you want comprehensive tools and a complete guide about how to spend your 30 minutes each day, check out my course called the 30-Minute Language System in the description. What's the #1 time-wasting activity you're going to cut from your language learning routine after this? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you're changing.